UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military projects, false flag alien invasions, PSYOP, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join the discussion now on UAP Crossfire.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to UAP Crossfire. It's a joy to have you with us tonight. This is where we gather to discuss all things UAP, UFO, and paranormal. And joining me tonight on our panel, as usual, Mr. Don Ecker from sunny California. How are you, Don?
Doing okay, Padre. We got back into business, as you know. I had a little computer malfunction that kind of threw me for a loop. It basically gave up the ghost, so I had to get another one. And then, to compound that, I had to get the thing set up. And I got to tell you, I hate having to set up a new computer. But, hey, that's me.
So now you're all up to date on your OnlyFans page, right?
I don't know.
When he finds out what an OnlyFans page is, he'll let you know.
Okay.
And if anybody here should have an OnlyFans page.
Of course. And that voice of an accusatory tone, just back from Saudi Arabia, so suntanned, and here back in the U.S., welcome to Commander Cobra. How are you, sir?
I am excellent, and I am excellent because waiting when I return from my trip is my copy of UFO Magazine, and Mr. Ecker and his lovely wife took the time to pick out one. Obviously, my obsession with flying triangles. This is the Avenger 2 that was going to be the Navy airplane that didn't get built. It was one of the designs. It also has some representation of other aircraft that may or may not be flying. Tremendous. Don and I were talking the other day, and he asked me about the magazine. It is just so fun to read stuff from that period and what is still very relevant. But one of the things that I found most interesting, and one of the things I love when I look at old National Geographics, old Popular Mechanics, is the ads. I don't know how close you can see the ad on this one. It's got a little pornography in it on there. But this is an ad, okay, that is selling a ET detector for your personal defense. And you can use MasterCard as well as Visa.
I have mine too. It's a close up here of the
and look at that. He again, another perfect selection for you on the Native Americans with all your experience up there in South Dakota. I mean, Absolutely. They just did a tremendous job, and I am so touched. I really mean that sincerely. It was just a wonderful gift. It really is.
Me too. I'm really looking forward to diving into this weekend. I've got some time off, and I'm going to be reading that cover to cover. So thank you, Don. Really appreciate it.
You gentlemen are more than welcome.
This one's this will be a framed one pretty soon.
Mr. DePerno is not with us this evening. He's off arresting some sort of a Bigfoot creature in his backyard. But we want to talk about the latest in UAP UFO news, and there is a lot going on. I want to begin by taking we've got Skywatcher with us.
Oh, we cannot let off the commander on his little over wherever trip that he was just on.
It all went very well. Thank you for the contact and the support when I was chatting with you guys by emails and messages. Yes, there I am in my favorite kind of suit.
Did you get a picture of when you were riding the camel, Cobra?
No, but here's a couple cameras going by me in traffic in the back there. And I believe that the good Padre said that's just like when he puts his four-wheelers in the back of his.
Yep.
When you put a couple camels in the back of your pickup there. I had a great time. Obviously, the Saudi Air Force folks that I work with are stupendous. The whole team I was there with was great. We got a lot done, and it was a very big positive turning point for my project. So I'm very proud, but I thank everybody for the happy emails and stuff that was sent along the way. Thank you.
And before you guys continue, Don, on behalf of myself, of course, I want to send my love and thanks to you and Vicky for sending me a magazine as well.
You got it there?
I don't have it here. It's still in my
Why?
drawer. Because
Why
I don't
not?
want what he's putting me on the spot. First of all, I don't want my dog or my mother to get even near it, so it's in a drawer, so nobody can touch it.
Did you send him UFO magazine, or did you send him a dirty magazine?
An old copy of Hustler I had.
That's kind of a UFO kind of thing.
It was a space-based one, like Skywatcher, the moon, and it's an awesome one too. And he took the time to pick one, like you said, specific.
It perfectly fits the aspect of our personalities.
And we'll ask Chris what you send him next week when Chris is on.
Oh, I can tell you right now, UFOs and war.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. Well, Padre, Commander, and the Silverback, have a great show, and see you guys later.
Sounds good, Bill. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have a whole lot of this UAP news that's been breaking lately. It seems like almost every day there are some new developments. But the big story just in the last few days has been the release of the final interview segment that Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp did with a whistleblower named Matthew Brown. Now, this is a fascinating story because it introduces some things that we have suspected for some time, but also some things that are rather disturbing. We're being told that very soon there's going to be some videos released by this whistleblower, one of which is purported to show a large UAP hiding in a cloud taken from above. And so we're waiting for that to break soon. I just want to go through some of the assertions in the video and get your commentary on it. One is right in your wheelhouse, Don, and so I'll begin with you. And that is the assertion that there are multiple entities that are piloting these craft and that they have been on Earth for as long or longer than humans. What do you think?
I consider that perfectly possible. Of course, I have no bottom line proof. I could never go into court and testify as a fact. The circumstantial evidence, however, would appear to be overwhelming, that something has been interfacing with human beings in excess of at least 10,000 years. Now, I had a dear friend, a very dear friend, a world-renowned author, Mr. Zacharias Sitchin, who basically back in about 1975, 76, began shining a light on ancient Sumerian culture, the writings, the tremendous number of cuneiform tablets that have been recovered over the last 4 or 5 decades or more, and the translation of many of these tablets talk about beings coming down from the sky and bestowing upon human beings the gift of civilization. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? Well, when I was in school and when I was in college, we were taught that Sumeria was the first recorded civilization that was approximately 6,000 years old. Now, I got to say, even at that time, I never accepted that. Human beings have been around for several 100,000 years. How do we know that? We know that through archaeological finds. We know that from archaeological sites. And the mainstream, I might add, has been vociferously, up until recent years, basically claiming that was wrong. I can even think of several times people in the scientific community were basically doxxed, were X'd out because of finds that they discovered and they tried to bring forward, and they were basically banished by the academic community. So, you know, it's always been a great controversy, but you cannot argue with the hard, cold facts as discovered and verified. Now, with that being said, 6,000 years ago, Sumeria basically suddenly blossomed upon the plains of Mesopotamia, okay, on the rivers there. They became a great civilization. Although they were never really unified at that time, they had separate city-states. Now, the Sumerians, when asked, well, how did you discover these things? And what things am I talking about? I'm talking about advanced mathematics, keeping time. I'm talking about astronomy. I'm talking about agricultural pursuits. I'm talking about animal husbandry. Seemingly out of nowhere, here are these people that have all of these things, building grand temples and structures, ziggurats, okay? Having armed forces. They had unified armies, trained warriors. How did that happen? Well, according to the Sumerians, they were bestowed those gifts by a group of beings they called the Anunnaki. And basically, Anunnaki translates roughly into those who came from heaven to earth. Now, they also maintained that the human beings were basically well, they didn't use these terms, but they were genetically engineered from proto-humans, ancestors of theirs, okay? And they were put together in order to, among other things, worship the gods. Now, these gods, these so-called gods, these Anunnaki, all right, purportedly even walked among them. They were not some amorphous thing up in the sky. They were actually there, okay? They would come, they would leave, and also they had more than commerce with these beings. As a matter of fact, there were even accounts in Gilgamesh, the great king, okay, Sumerian king, was purportedly the byproduct of one of these unions between a human being, his father, and an Anunnaki goddess. Now, there are some other things about these beings that are very unusual. They were compared to us and today. Okay, what's the average height of a male today? Anywhere from 5'9" up to 6 feet tall. Of course, we have individuals that are much larger than that and much smaller than that. But average speaking, these beings, according to the Sumerians, were gigantic in stature. They would average, well, females 10, 11 feet in height, males up to 14, even 15 feet tall. They were gigantic beings. Now, one thing that I've always done, and I'm a vociferous reader, okay, and researcher. There is a biblical book, the Book of Enoch, that, by the way, was tossed out of the Christian Bible for a myriad of reasons, according to the so-called authorities at that time. But this book, if you've never looked at it, and incidentally, you can find it online, This book is scary. It's fascinating. It gives stories that you're not going to hear in church on Sunday as a rule, okay? People don't like to talk about it because of what it may portend. And what it portends is this, that at some point in the distant past, the Almighty God sent down to earth 200 angels to watch over mankind. And if you have a copy of the Bible there, and you open up the first book of the Bible, Genesis, and you go to chapter 6 in Genesis, verses 1 through 4, it talks about the plural, sons of God went down to the earth, basically found human women highly desirous, and they took for wives and concubines, basically as many as they wished. Now, paraphrasing, that's not it exactly. Padre here could probably be a little more specific. But the bottom line was they had progeny from these unions. And these unions that produced progeny, these babies that were born, became the Nephilim, okay? A hybrid mix of human being and, well, angels, if that's exactly what they were. I don't think they were angels, but I do think they were extraterrestrials. Now, these Nephilim were some bad Jose's, okay? Because later on, among other things, they were brutal. They preyed upon humans. They ate human beings. The wickedness was so great, according to the church teachings, that God, the God, finally got upset with it and did the great flood, the deluge, primarily to wipe out the evil and wickedness and these Nephilim. Now, with that being said, what proof do we have? Well, we do know.
John, let me just grab a quick thing. I just read with new ground penetrating radar and surveys, researchers believe they have found where Noah's Ark resides and where it is built up. You know, we've seen this a number of times over the years, but it's interesting how many times we found sites that go along with this and the continued interest. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, that's a story that's been banging around. Supposedly, okay, back in the late 50s, the early 60s, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, on one of their U-2 flights, purportedly photographed over in Turkey, okay, a glacier site that it was claimed part of Noah's Ark was sticking out of the ice. Okay, are you familiar with that?
Absolutely. I saw the movie.
Okay.
The movie Noah with Russell Crowe?
No.
Okay.
This predates that movie.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, there's at least a lot of evidence to say that it ain't all what we might think it is. But to get back to the Nephilim, as a matter of fact, there it is, the Book of Enoch. To get back to the Nephilim, Commander Cobra and Chris and Padre, I don't think you were around then.
Okay.
There had been some stories that flowed out of Afghanistan about an incident that took place a number of years ago after our troops went there, where a military unit purportedly, which was on a patrol up in the mountains looking for the Taliban and the bad guys, suddenly disappeared. They lost all contact with them. They didn't get a tick from their radio people. That means troops in contact. In other words, if the bad guys would have ambushed them. So it ended up that a special forces unit, Green Berets, maybe some SEALs, were purportedly sent to look for them. And they found an area with bits and pieces of military junk. Okay, stuff that looked like it had been torn apart. And they reached up into this area. I believe Cobra, and I'm going from memory now, that was in Kandahar, right?
Yeah, the Giant of Kandahar is the story.
Yes.
They got up there, and suddenly, out of this cave, a tremendously huge spear was launched that hit one of the soldiers, went right through him. And I'm talking about damn near a telephone-sized pole, all right, the spear. And the long and the short of it was, as you might imagine, I mean, if you've ever been in a situation like that, a combat situation, initially, when it breaks, you're shocked for an instant, but then you better pull it together or you're lost. And these guys opened up on this purportedly 15 or 16 foot red-haired giant that came lunging out of this cave to regain his spear and I guess attack the rest of the troops. Everybody in 7 counties opened up on him. And he was ultimately killed in like 30 seconds. Now, according to the reports, and hey, I wasn't there, this being had 6 toes on each foot, 6 fingers on each hand, weighed approximately, they said, 1,500 pounds or so. And they sent in a Chinook helicopter, that's a big one, with a cargo net. And purportedly, they bundled this thing into the cargo net, took off, never to be heard from again. So yeah, there's some weird stuff out there. And I'm sorry I took so long, but when I get rolling, Padre.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject. You know, we read of Goliath in the Old Testament, and he's so many cubits in a span, which I did the math last year. It comes out to about 9 foot 6 inches. He had a spear described as a weaver's beam. So there you have another large spear. And the thing about Goliath is he had some brothers, and one of them is reported to have 6 fingers and 6 toes. So there's a strain genetically of gigantism that speaks to that. But Commander Cobra, we want to get your opinion here of this idea that alien beings have always been here ever since we have been here. What do you think?
As with Don, I think it's a strong possibility. Don touched upon also another aspect of it. You know, we've been somewhat arrogant in our approach to how old the Earth is, how long man as a species has been on board. I think it's interesting very recently how many major media personalities are talking about, you know, just this, you know, this life starting without some supreme order or some basically God. You know, you have a lot more people talking about it now than you ever had before. And it's not very scientific. It's not scientific method when you ignore things that don't fit into your theory that you're trying to prove. And we've gotten off the track on that. And then I've seen on the other side, there's fundamental religions that have an exact date how old the Earth is, an exact date on how long man has been here, exact locations, but we can't, you know, quite, you know, find the exact location. I think that there is more evidence that there is a possibility. And what does that ET among us mean? Is it the biblical angel? Is it other civilizations? At this point in the discussion, I don't think that that's nearly as important as to say, are you willing to entertain and look at this from that perspective? And if you are, you will find a number of things that we've just barely scratched the surface on. Books of Enoch, the Hebrew Christian Bible, the Quran, Taoism in Asia. There's repeatedly patterns that follow on this. And I can't imagine how you would just rule it out any more than you would say it is absolutely true that this is exactly what's happened, because that lacks, as Don, so easily put, we don't have the hard evidence for that. Mm-hmm. But if you're willing to entertain those theories, if you're willing to at least listen to them, I think it helps actually broaden your perspective when you look at other things that go on. Perfect case in point. You've just tied biblical recordings of Goliath and David, who becomes King David, and the leader of the Jewish nation. And there's now, obviously, when you get some of the reports, did somebody have good Old Testament or First Testament knowledge and had 6 fingers and 6 toes in this combat encounter? Maybe. But I think it's worth understanding that when you say that it absolutely has to be this, you are denying yourself the ability to look at the whole picture and actually maybe get something revealed. Dan and I have talked about this offline. I don't find this as a threat to anything that I believe, any of my religious practices. I don't have that. Because number one thing, aside from the instruction that says I have to love everyone, I don't necessarily have to like them. That's my add on to that part of it, is that I will never put a determination on the limits of what God can do or has done. And that's where I think we get in trouble. That's where I think we get ourselves off the path.
Well, I just want to tag on to something that each of you has said, tangentially related. But if you would permit me, we have referenced this passage several times in Genesis, and I have it right in front of me. If you'll just allow me to read these few
verses. This is what happens when you bring a padre to the show.
I'm reading from the book of Genesis, chapter 6, commencing with verse 1. When mankind began to multiply on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of mankind were beautiful, and they took any they chose as wives for themselves. And the Lord said, my spirit will not remain with mankind forever, because they are corrupt. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth, both in those days and afterwards, when the sons of God came to the daughters of mankind, who bore children to them. They were powerful men of old and famous men. And when the Lord saw the wickedness was widespread on the earth, that in every inclination of the human mind was nothing but evil all the time, the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth and was deeply grieved. And then we move into the story of Noah and the flood. But what this tells us is, as Don paraphrased accurately, is that there were these beings, here described as the Son of God, and in theological circles, there's great debate as to actually who these beings were. Don referenced the Anunnaki, and you said that name means beings from above? Is that
those who from heaven to earth came?
Okay. So as Cobra just said, when we start to have an open mind and look at and cross-reference outside of what may be our box of comfort, we can begin to find bits and pieces that tie together. I mean, the Genesis account talks about beings called the sons of God, who purportedly came from above. Then we have the Anunnaki, whose name means beings from above. And as a result of this interaction, there were bad guys on the earth, and the Nephilim come into existence. You can see that, as Cobra has just said, it's dangerous when we simply just put up our force field and say, no, I'm not going to go there. It's wrong. I mentioned to the guys before the show that this week I finally finished Luis Elizondo's book, Imminent. And one of the things he had in there is he was referencing the pushback, supposedly, allegedly, that he had from high-level officials in government who were, quote, fundamentalist Christians, who terminated his exploration of certain avenues because of their closed-mindedness And they simply said to him, read your Bible if you want the answer, or you're doing the devil's work. Don't look into this. It's all demonic. As Cobra said, when we just throw a blanket, all-inclusive thing over topics as complex as UAP, we do ourselves and the public a disservice, because we have to have the ability to explore these other avenues in order to determine whether there is validity in them or not. And so for Mr. Elizondo to seemingly blanketly reject then these people as being closed-minded, I don't think that's necessarily fair. And that's one of the reasons why I ended up on this show. You guys know that about a year ago, I got upset with another UFO podcast that was had a guest that said that evangelical Christians have no place in the UAP discussion because of what we believe, and said that basically we're intellectually inferior for holding on to those beliefs. Well, you just can't put everybody in the same box, especially when it comes to religious beliefs and Christian beliefs in particular. I am an evangelical, what some would call fundamentalist Christian, but here I am, and I'm not threatened, as Cobra said, by anything that's been said here. I want to know. I want to know the truth. Because,
well, Padre, you said several things that I feel I must address and cross-reference.
Okay.
Okay? You were talking about these beings that purportedly came down from heaven. Sumeria is special in a number of ways. All right, not only with their pursuits of mathematics, astronomy, etc., the scientific medicine. I forgot to mention also medicine. But there were other things that came out. Now, we're talking about the Bible. We're talking about the Hebrew Christian Bible specifically. Okay. And tell me, Padre, who is the recognized father of the Jewish peoples?
Oh, Abraham is the father of all the Abrahamic religions, which is Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Yeah.
Where did Abraham come from?
He came from Ur of the Chaldees, which is Sumeria, I believe.
Yes, he did. My first point is to talk about that.
Okay.
He was a Sumerian. Actually, at that time, he would have been called a Habaru. Okay, which is very close today to a Hebrew, but a Habaru. All right. The black-headed people is what Sumeria was known as, the black-headed people. Now, when he came out of there and began wondering, which basically, Habaru, that's what it means, okay? They wonder. He took many of things that later would be incorporated into the Jewish Torah and ultimately into the Christian Bible. One of those things, and I'm not going to go into all of it because, my God, I'd be here talking all night and you guys will get upset. But one thing was the flood, all right? The Sumerians had a flood tradition, all right? And later, this flood tradition became incorporated into the Christian Bible and also the, excuse me, I'm sorry, phone.
I hate when the president calls you while we're having a show.
I know it, or the NSA to tell me to shut my mouth. You never know. But anyway, okay, here are the deals. That many things within the Hebrew and Christian Bible originally came from Sumerian writings. So you got to ask yourself, how much crossover between Abraham and what he did emanated originally from Sumerian traditions and what have you. That's number one. Number two, Padre, you talked about Elizondo and being cautioned by some senior, according to him,
Right.
some senior officials at the Pentagon about the danger of pursuing certain avenues in UFO. The hell with the UAP. It's always been UFO. It's UFO research. Okay? And that caused me to think, all right, now, my understanding of this topic began many years ago, and originally, and I believe I've said this here a number of times, initially I believed everything was a nuts and bolts thing, okay? Actual physical craft coming from perhaps another star system, and incidentally, I still believe that in part. But then other things started to happen, which caused my thinking to evolve. Skinwalker Ranch was one of them. All right. Now, I talked to some people that had been out there, not the least of which was George Knapp. Okay. Now, that incidentally might be great fodder for another evening to talk about that. But according to Knapp, they witnessed some absolutely astounding things, including a being crawling out of a seemingly impossible thing, a portal. Now, if any of that's even remotely true, that suggests an interdimensional rift, something that was able to come through into our reality. Now, Knapp, okay, and I questioned George. I did everything. At that time, Robert Bigelow owned that property. And I did everything but get on my knees to beg Knapp to intercede for me so I could go out there and spend a couple of days roaming around the ranch. I got to tell you, today I am very, very happy that never came through, because there were stories that were floating around, and I checked on them, okay, that entities apparently followed some of these people back to their homes and created havoc. So finally, we're talking about this, and I looked at George Knapp, and I said, George, you and I have known each other for a very long time. Yeah, oh yeah. I said, let me ask you, you spent a lot of time out there, buddy. George, did anything ever follow you home? And he stopped. He got very quiet. And I just sat there. I waited. And finally he said, yes, it did. But he wouldn't elaborate on it. Okay? So, I'm like I said, I'm very glad. But what am I getting at? Well, the interdimensional thing. If what Elizondo was saying was true, okay, and these people back at the Pentagon, these quote-unquote fundamentalists, and by the way, Padre, they had a name that they called themselves, called the Collins Elite. This is what they were referred to as, these alleged fundamentalist military guys. The Collins Elite. The idea that perhaps some of these beings that came through right out of hell. Okay.
Wow.
This is what I think these guys were freaked out about. But if that's true, as an investigator, as a researcher, okay, it behooves you to follow up on that. If you're honest in your own heart, you got to follow up on that. And apparently, a lot of people didn't want to take on that risk.
Your thoughts, Commander, on the metaphysical aspect of the UAP phenomenon?
One of the things that I think have concluded, and luckily amongst these my fellow co-hosts here, I think what Don was referring to in his nuts and bolts was, people wanted to look at one area and didn't see this unified theory or this unified understanding that all this is connected. Mm-hmm. We have countless UFO, UAP activity that has Bigfoots. And in our chat room, Genghis made a question remark, is the Sasquatch a possible remnant of the Nephilim?
Yeah.
I think that's worthy of discussion. But when you are telling me that, how many times have we talked in the past where, no, we don't want to talk about paranormal. We're here to talk about UAPs. Mm-hmm. Okay. Interdimensionality might be the way that you bring a craft over great distances. Sometimes talk in science fiction, folding space-time continuum, wormholes, all these other activities that are going on. And it may also explain why we don't have lots and lots of evidence of where they may be hiding, because they may leave the portal. Well, if that's available, it's like a highway, right? Or it's a doorway. It might mean there's other entities that are there. Hell, whatever that is, what that part is, the fallen angels that we talk about from the Bible, all those things that are there might have access or at some point under certain conditions able to do that. If you are willing to accept that part of the discussion, a lot of this fits or makes some level of sense. At least to me it does, why we have some of the things that go on. And if you want to be more of a purist on this and just look at aspects, that's fine as well. But to me, to have this, I think what really elevates the discussion goes back to the earlier part of being able to look at many points on the compass on this. Mm-hmm. It doesn't throw me off, but I think that much like physics is trying to prove how everything is connected, this is just an embodiment of that same thing. And it doesn't, I don't find it the least bit offsetting at all. I think it actually makes a lot more sense or helps me accept some of the things that are happening.
I wanted also, Commander, to kind of tie into what you're saying with this realization by many in the scientific field, finally, an acknowledgement of a realm that they don't understand. As we have become more capable at looking at the smaller aspects of things like cells and DNA and getting down to the subatomic particle area, we got this big thing, what's it called, CERN in Europe, that's experimenting with these particles. That there's a gentleman, there's a book I recommend for our viewers and listeners. It's called Darwin's Doubt by an accomplished scientist named Stephen C. Meyer. He's been a guest on many podcasts and news programs and so forth. And the book speaks to the fact that as scientists get down more and more into the building blocks of life, they've come to an understanding that what we have been fed as fact, as far as specifically the evolution of humans, is impossible. They're encountering things that point to an intelligent design of not just human life, but all life. And for those who wish to examine that, you can take a look at his book. Again, it's Dr. Stephen C. Meyer. But that to say, here on this panel, we try to keep an open mind and we try to allow differing points of view. And it's not incumbent upon us to accept everything as fact. I think it's good that we have critical thinking abilities. As we look at where these beings come from and who they might be, this whistleblower, Matthew Brown, says that there is more than one race of these entities. And even he acknowledges that he doesn't know if we're dealing with interstellar, interdimensional, or some other form of being. But there are factions of them that are at war with one another. And as Don...
Sounds like you're talking about my paper on disclosure.
Well, and Don, you've talked in the past about this, and I think you have too, Commander Cobra, that there are what are the mosaic reliefs or artwork from ancient India that seem to imply that there was some kind of a great war or conflict going on in the heavens. Commander, let's start with you. What is your perception on the nature of these beings and their hostility toward one another or possibly to us?
So it tells me if that's the case, and there seems to be not just in ancient Hindu recordings as late or in the 1600s, we have all these famous tapestries and paintings that show this. We have things that are in cathedrals. A lot of things are documenting, showing these kind of things, and they can be explained away, or can have an alternate theory to what people are seeing and talking about. It tells me at the onset that these are not ultimately spiritual beings. They don't have that. There's a physical nature to them. It tells me that it may be rival planetary races, or because you travel interdimensionally, you come from some other place. So
right.
Now, if it's interdimensionally that somehow we're all on the same planet, I understand that's a possibility. But I'm just saying that's the travel method to go forward. Are they looking? Are there some that are looking to dominate? Is there some kind of if you put it against the kind of world events that we are facing now with all the different geopolitical kind of things going on, I think that would apply to other civilizations that are from other worlds, other dimensions, however you want to phrase that. Doesn't throw me off. It does seem to be consistent with some of the interactions that people have reported over the years, of it being friendly, of it being horrifying, and then, kind of like an in-between intersection where there seems to be these workers that are doing like the yeoman work, the collection, the study, and then the return, after they've got their sample. And if you look at how we sometimes will do the same thing to animals on this planet for, research or whatever reasons that are going on and they're trying to investigate, it kind of fits the pattern. I don't know if our own experience is what is influencing what people are saying that they've experienced, or if it's or which way it goes, or if it's a little bit of both. Doesn't surprise me in the least that you would find that there's different entities. We've heard them all: Nordics, reptilians, grays, all those things that are in there. Again, not incompatible to anything that goes on. Doesn't surprise me. It's interesting what their rules of engagement are. Is there some kind of mutual hold off that they just don't smite us? Is there something that's going back and forth? Are there some that are here that are, working that, the intergalactic, interdimensional special op to protect us, despite our own best efforts to knock ourselves off the planet and destroy the planet? Don't know. I think that there's multitude of theories out there, more than my little reptilian brain can. Not saying that I'm a reptile. I'm just saying.
You spilled the beans, Commander. The truth is out there now. Okay, Don, your perspectives on a ET war going on and Earth caught in the middle.
Well, okay. Number one, first I've got to go back to Margaret Mead. Okay. In the 60s, all right, when I was just a youngster, 13, 14 years of age, I begged my parents for a telescope. Okay, one of the greatest things in the world I wanted a telescope. And in 1963, I got one. Unfortunately, it was 5 days after Christmas when it finally arrived. Okay, but that first night, I'll never forget this, The Outer Limits was on. And I watched The Outer Limits because I didn't miss that science fiction program ever, if I could help it. And as soon as it was over, I grabbed my telescope, I ran out in the backyard, set it up. The moon was out. Bright. My God, it was brilliant. And I started looking at it. And my first sight of the moon through that telescope, my breath caught in my throat, okay? That put me on a years-long fascination about the moon. Now, why did I mention Margaret Mead? Well, NASA was gearing up for the Apollo program, all right? And for 400 years, this is documented, astronomers worldwide, okay? And remember, we did have the ability then to manufacture and make telescopes. These astronomers reported seeing all types of things on the moon, everything from what appeared to be volcanic eruptions, craters. Now, we're talking primarily the moon facing the planet because it's in a locked orbit. We never see the far side of the moon, only the front, what we call the front part of the moon. And these observations were documented. So there was a lot happening back in those days. For example, in the Soviet Union, and of course we were in competition with the Soviet Union to get to the moon first. Okay, they had a lot of, and they've always in some regard seemed to be much more open-minded about certain things than what we were. Now, for example, the Martian moon Phobos. There were some at that time, very top Russian astronomers that believed Phobos and Deimos were not only placed into Mars orbit back in the 19th century, okay, because astronomers for a couple of hundred years looked at Mars. They never saw these moons before. Suddenly, in the mid-1870s, boom, they popped up. There they were. Now, how did that happen? And some Russian astronomers theorized that these things were artificial. All right? Now, Margaret Mead was among a panel of academics that NASA contracted with in order to do a study on the moon. They wanted to try to get an idea of what they might be encountering once we got there. And the report that came out was called NASA Technical Report 270. And in there, it documents all of these sightings and phenomena that were popping up. Now, when I became officially involved in research in the late 1980s, all right, I had an interest before, but hell, I didn't know anybody worth talking to back then about it. I always thought that if there were extraterrestrials, the moon would be a perfect place to set up camp. Okay? Now, I was talking to hundreds, perhaps thousands of people over the next 20 years, all right, at UFO Magazine. And I heard this refrain time and time again, that there were at least 7 different extraterrestrial civilizations coming here, maybe even more. That several of them were benign, okay? They had no beef with humanity. We were more of an academic study. Then we had some that would just pop in for whatever reason. Maybe we were a truck stop, okay, to get some needed supplies, perhaps water, although there's a hell of a lot of water out in the universe. Water, perhaps other provisions. And then there were some that just kind of found us curious. But there was one group of ETs that had a pure hatred for humanity. Now, it's been theorized, and I stress theory, all right, that there is a type of directive that apparently is being adhered to, that at least overtly, nobody fiddles with human beings. Overtly.
Don,
yes.
Hold there. We have to go to the break. And this is the great tag to get people to show up at the other side.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be back after this short break with more on these evil, hostile beings and their nefarious intentions. Stay tuned. UAP Crossfire here on the KGRADB network.
I warned you when I get rolling.
Yeah.
From Iraq and Afghanistan, our brave warriors are coming home, wounded. Some with wounds you can see, some with wounds you can't see. Wounded Warrior Project was created to support our men and women coming off the battlefield. Please help carry these warriors the rest of the way home. Get involved at woundedwarriorproject.org.
MUFON is the voice of thousands of like-minded people who want to see change. We speak up against UFO secrecy. We engage governments and agencies around the world on the topic. We share information with the public through our journal, website, newsletter, social media, and even our own TV channel. When you join MUFON, you add your voice to the cause. Few things are more important in our time than understanding the UFO question. Join MUFON. Find your friends.
Welcome back to UAP Crossfire. Dan Carlson here with Don Ecker and Commander Cobra. And right before the break, Don was about to reveal to us the identity of the particularly malevolent alien species. Don?
Well, there's more to it than just simply that. In 88, 89, I was starting to make introductions of myself, UFO magazine, to some people. One of them was Mr. John Keel. Now, Keel was a longtime researcher, writer, author, 14. He always stressed he was 14, which is modeled after Charles Fort. You don't know who that was? Well, let me suggest you plug Charles Fort into your search engine and do a little background on him. And he was a guy,
he gets a new computer and he starts talking all the lingo, all the smack. Stick it in your search engine, catch a clue, Cobra. Catch up with me, okay? I got a new computer. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you found me out, dude. You found me out.
Now the dude. Listen to this. Such a West Coast. This boy. What a face. Look at that boy.
Well, Charles Fort was a guy that collected oddities. All right. As a matter of fact, there are a couple of books out. I don't know. They're probably still available that Fort wrote. Even today, a century later, over a century later, these books are still prime reading, called L-O, by Charles Fort, and The Book of the Damned by Charles Fort. And he covered everything, including aerial phenomena, okay? Well, Keel and I were talking, and I mentioned to him, as a criminal investigator, because there were a lot of stories that were starting to come out about cattle mutilations. I told Keel that I had investigated 2 cattle mutilations, okay, back in 81, 82. And we started talking, and then the great taboo was raised. The great taboo was human mutilations. And Keel gave me a couple of cases where some inexplicable and, quite frankly, horrifying things happened. All right. Well, he shouldn't have said anything, by God, because that put me on a 3 or 4 year quest to try to break through that. And that was 3 or 4 years I was beating my head against a solid brick wall. But that's story for another time. But who would do something like that? Well, okay, there were other things happening, like drug cartels. I mean, you can get stories like that out of Mexico today, but these were precise mutilations, and with surgical precision. I mean, down in Mexico, if you get on somebody's wrong side, they're apt to pull a machete out and just hack you to pieces. These were not that, all right? So that kind of suggested to me that, okay, there might be some bad guys out there, all right? And then Penetration was released. Ingo Swann. Now, in the mid to latter 90s, the stories broke about the Stargate program, psychic remote viewers. And believe me, if you weren't around then, or if you weren't paying attention then, that was quite a story. Well, as soon as I got my hands on that book, I took it home and I devoured that thing as quickly as I could. Now, remember, at that time, I was in the middle of my lunar research. So one day at UFO Magazine, I get a call from a gentleman back in New Jersey, Bordentown, New Jersey, by the name of Pat Martilio. And he said, Don, he said, boy, I'd sure like you to come back here to Bordentown and give a talk on your moon research, on your lunar research. Would you consider that? And I said, well, Pat, sure. I have to talk to Vicky about it. But yeah, I think we could probably do that. Now, you realize UFO Magazine is a small operation. So, we've got to make arrangements and what have you for that. He said, yeah, sure. Well, I ended up going. And Vicky and I both went. And Pat, of course, did a lot of promotion about this. So before the talk, I'm in there with Vic, and these guys walk in, and my God, one of them was Ingo Swann. Okay. Now, who was Ingo Swann? Well, you probably all today know who Ingo was, but he was the gentleman, and I might add, he was considered one of the very top psychically talented people on planet Earth. All right. And some of the stuff that he did, well, it's mind-blowing in hindsight. But anyway, we were introduced. I shook his hand. We went up to a separate room, sat down, we talked, and I'm kind of ashamed to say it today, but I was a smoker then, okay? And Ingo loved little cigars, all right? He smoked little cigars. And we went up there and we sat down, and I lit up, he lit up, and we're talking about the moon. And of course, I had already read what he had to say about his experience with the moon. So I wanted to talk to him deeply about that, and did get a chance at that time. But not too long after that, he had family out here on the West Coast. So I got a call from a friend of his and said, "Hey, Don," he said, "how would you and Vicky like to meet me and Ingo, okay, at a restaurant? Ingo's coming out here and he'd like to see you guys." And I said, "Oh my God, that'd be great. Sure." So we ended up meeting at a small Italian restaurant in Burbank. And boy, I'm telling you what a night that was. Not only did we eat, we enjoyed a couple of bottles of fine wine, but the food was exquisite. But we sat there and we started talking. Now, by that time, I had devoured his book, Penetration, 5, maybe 6 times. And he wanted to pump me about what I had discovered. Now, I had how should I say this? I had a source, okay? I had a source over at JPL, the Jet Propulsion.
A JPL CI.
Shh. And they had lunar archives over there. And one day, I got a call. This is a side street, but I'll be right back in a moment. I got a side call. This guy had walked out with a stack of photographs about this deep, okay? And he surreptitiously got them out of there. He, of course, had to take them back. But guess what I did? Every bloody photograph in that pile I scanned, all right? And in a number of those photos were, quite frankly, some shocking things. Now, you got to understand about NASA. Okay, and believe me, I've had my encounters with the folks at NASA. Never a straight answer. That's what NASA stands for. All right. Now, in some of those photos were obviously some type of artifact that were there. But the tour de force was the one where I had to put in, and I, God, if I'd have known we were going to go there, I'd have had it available to put up on the screen. There's a photograph there taken from above. It was from a lunar orbiter that shot this crater, and you clearly can see a huge pipe running through the middle of this crater, through the wall of the crater, and there was a cliff there, okay, that this, you could trace the pipe through the lunar soil to where it came out over this cliff, and it had some kind of huge attachment on it. Now, I sat on that for a number of years because I wanted to have exactly the right venue to show that. And later in 2014, I was hired as a research producer on a sci-fi program, Aliens on the Moon, The Truth Revealed. Now, I got a bad rap there because the executives were bound and determined, and I'll just be very blunt about this, to insert
for the audience,
bullshit
this is an exception.
into this program. And it was quite telling bullshit. The alien Mona Lisa, okay, on Apollo programs 18, 19, and 20, which by all accounts never happened. All right. But they had some hoaxers put this together. This alleged alien woman was found allegedly on the moon, allegedly in a crashed spaceship that had been there for centuries. Okay. And they took photos of her, and she ended up getting the name the Mona Lisa. Now you can find that online. She was dead plastic there, Padre.
Oh, okay.
Dead plastic. Okay. So anyway, to get back to the original gist of this, so the human mutilation thing ended up taking on a life of its own. And there were individuals, and because there were individuals at that time, people like Whitley Strieber, people like Stephen Greer, people like, I'm trying to think of some of the others that, Bud Hopkins, okay. Now, Bud, who was probably the most well-known researcher of human abductions. Forget this crap about experiencers. Somebody comes into your bedroom at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and takes you out of there against your will and ends up doing experiments and probing you, and then very kindly drops you back off. All right. That ain't an experience in my book, Bubba. I was a cop. That is an abduction, okay? And he would never, Bud would never speak ill. And I confronted him about it one time privately. And I said, Bud, look, there's this case where irretrievable harm was done to these people. How can you say it's all benign? And his answer was, I don't want to scare the public. Well, but maybe the public needs to be scared. All right? Maybe they need to know that it ain't all wine and roses, buddy. Well, the bottom line was we took a lot of heat because I ran some articles in UFO magazine about these human mutilations and did some deep digging and came out with some very strange stories, especially on the East Coast, believe it or not. And so anyway, we got a lot of hate and discontent about that. But to get back to the point, these alleged hostile aliens, okay, what would be their conceivable purpose? Well, Swan, during this 5-hour dinner in Burbank, California, told me what he thought. In about 1975 or thereabouts, he received a call from an associate of his, somebody he knew. And remember, this is all going during the SRI thing, the Stanford research thing, when they're working on the protocols and Stargate, the remote viewing, all this kind of business. And he said, Ingo, he said, look, he said, there's some people that would like to talk to you, and expect a phone call from them in the next several weeks. So Swan said, okay. Well, he got that call a few weeks later, about 3 or 3:30 in the morning. And they told him to drop his shorts, pick up his socks, scoot out to the airport. They wanted him to fly down to D.C. Well, He went down to D.C., went to the Natural History Museum, was met by two guys originally Ingo Swann thought were brothers. They weren't, but they were very similar. These buff guys looked like they spent all their spare time in the gym lifting weights. And, these guys, he quite frankly was scared of them. And they put him in a car, put a blindfold over him, drove him out apparently to an airport, put him on a helicopter. They took off. They flew around for a while, finally landed. He got off the helicopter, the hood's still intact, went downstairs, went into a very, from what he said, a very deep room down below, and finally had his hood taken off. And basically, he said he was met by this man who called himself Mr. Axelrod. And they knew all about Swann, okay? They knew everything about him, even the kind of cigars he smoked. They had a big package of his favorite cigars right there. And the deal was, we want you to do a remote viewing job for us. And by the way, they never identified who they were. And we will pay you $1,000 a day while you're here. Well, good God, even today, are you going to turn down $1,000, okay, for one day's work? So he said, fine. Well, what they wanted him to do was to remotely view the moon. And they gave him a set of coordinates. He began, and when he first mentally touched down, he was confused. He thought he was back on Earth, because here was this open like plane with what had like tractor tread marks in it. But anyway, Mr. Axelrod got him squared away, sent him to another location, gave him the coordinates, and go pop there. And finally, he saw what appeared to be almost like stadium lights, okay, over this crater. And he walked over there, and there were buildings there, all types of things. There was like a green haze over this area, apparently some type of shield. And then the freakiest part was when he saw humanoid creatures working out of the buildings without environmental suits on, in the dirt, under this shield. And he was kind of flummoxed. What the heck is this? And suddenly, they knew he was there. They all started looking up and pointing. And somehow, psychically, they knew Ingo Swann was observing them. Well, he freaked out, told Axelrod this. Axelrod immediately had him break the connection, come back, and hey, he was shaken to his very core. Now, what he told me that night, okay, in Burbank, he said, Don, he said, I spent the next 3 or 4 months scared out of my mind that they were going to come and fry my brains. And I said, well, obviously they didn't. Well, we started talking more to get an idea of what this might have all been about. And Swann told me, he said, number one, he had no idea who Axelrod or these two goons were, all right? Didn't have a clue. He said they could have been CIA, NSA, they could have been Mossad, they could have been aliens. And I looked at him and I said, alien? He said, hey, I don't know. Okay. And incidentally, there was another incident that I brought up where he encountered a beautiful, ravishing, barely dressed woman in a supermarket here on the West Coast, where these two thugs were at opposite ends of the store, keeping her under observation. he stumbles in there, and the closer he got to her, he said, suddenly the hair in the back of my neck stood up, and I knew she was an alien. And then Axelrod reached out to him. Okay, there's more to the story, but the bottom line was he was told, if you ever see her again, stay away from her. She's deadly dangerous. Okay, so I talked to him about that too. But anyway, to get back to this. So I said, well, what's the bottom line? He said, I'll tell you, whoever those beings were on the moon, they're doing something there. And he said they are hateful toward human beings. And I said, well, why would they be hateful? He said they're highly, highly psychic. And they are highly, highly angry that human beings also have a psychic talent. So that was his, readout on this, why there may be, so if we are psychic, and he obviously was, Swan, my God, he was psychic. And there were others like him, a guy by the name of Pat Price, who incidentally in the mid-70s died under very mysterious circumstances. He was at SRI. Both he, Price, and Swan were considered the two stars there. But they got the remote viewing program going. Well, then over the years, there were many others that came forward we began to know more about. And many of them were tasked primarily by the CIA, the DIA. These were on intelligence gathering missions. These guys, they kept the program in operation, the feds, for over 20 years, financing it every year. Now look, Cobra will tell you, and I'll tell you, I was involved in intelligence in Vietnam. They don't do something if they're not getting something for it, especially not for 20 bloody years they're not, So they were getting something out of this, and many of these guys encountered UFOs, and it had nothing to do with UFOs. But on some of these missions, there was one very famous case where a Soviet, at that time there was still a Soviet Union, a Soviet submarine they were keeping an eye on for some reason, and there was according to the remote viewer, was a UFO hovering above the Soviet sub. The remote viewer clearly saw that. So, there's a lot of things going on here that most people don't even have a clue. And once again, I apologize. I'm going to shut up now.
Okay. Well, thank you, Don. There's some important historical information there. I want to get back to this interview that was done with Matthew Brown. Now, before I ask the questions, gentlemen, I want to give you a little bit of background on Mr. Brown. He is a U.S. national security and defense analyst. He served as a contractor, not a direct government employee, in several high-level roles within the U.S. government. Specifically, he worked as a policy advisor for the Office of the Secretary of Defense, a technical advisor for the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, a program advisor for the Department of State. His work involved access to classified materials, and he did hold a top-secret/sensitive compartmented information, or TS/SCI clearance, with a counterintelligence scope polygraph indicating he was entrusted with highly sensitive information. Now, he alleges exposure to the Immaculate Constellation document that was read into the congressional hearing a few months ago. And he says that it was in 2018, while he was reviewing classified materials on a shared server at the Pentagon, where he accidentally discovered misfiled documents related to this unacknowledged special access program. And he described his roles as involving analytical work, pulling together all source information to draw conclusions, a skill set that he applied to his findings on UAP. He also pursued a master's degree in security policy studies at George Washington University, but did not complete his thesis because he was so involved in his work at the Pentagon. So he was primarily a contractor with high security clearance in the Pentagon, and he worked on defense-related projects for more than 5 years. And he emphasized that he was not a UFO enthusiast at the time. He never attended UFO conferences, and he approached his findings with an analytical mindset instead of going and actually looking for UAP. Now, I want to share with you quotes now from this interview, because it's sort of related to some of the material that Don was sharing. And Commander, I'd like you to comment on this. Perhaps the two most impactful quotes from the interview. This one, quote, "We live in a dream, a carefully constructed reality. We make use of a science that is tightly controlled, suppressed, and distorted. People have been left behind. We are taught false science intentionally to prevent us from learning more. We live in the matrix." And this is how he ended his interview. "You are not free, and this reality has far more to it than you have been allowed to believe." And his final comment was, "God is real." Commander, thoughts?
A lot packed in that statement.
Yeah.
I don't think it's anything new that we have spoken about in the past. Are we in a construct? Are we in a created reality? I think that there could be some factual basis to that. It explains a lot of the inconsistencies that we talked about tonight and we've talked about in the past and others have talked about. What I mean by that is you have finite discussions where how old the Earth is, and then you have these nibblings at the edge, right, that start to point to other science. We have inconsistencies in what we think are hard science discoveries. And then when you get to the next level, as you were talking about earlier, on things like DNA, things like physics, and you get into the particle level of physics, we've had years and untold fortunes, treasure that's spent on trying to prove or disprove or discover the understanding of what theories are. String theory comes to mind to make things work. I think that is interesting. The part that I find, I'm not going to say disingenuous. That's not it's not the right word. What I find frustrating about these people, and you gave all the laurels of all these things that he's come around, and he found this accidentally. Here's a person that supposedly has all the credentials. I'm not doubting them. You listed all this stuff. So one of two things: either he saw something. Well, there's noble things. He saw something he wasn't supposed to see. That's how he kind of explained it. He stumbled upon it. Mm-hmm. Yet he hasn't been spirited away. He hasn't been silenced. And some reason, this event he felt he was going to disclose. I find that a little curious. Well, if you have all this and you've passed all these tests that say that you're extremely reliable, that you're not going to give up secrets, that you're not a security star, and you've been trusted with more of this, to me, if you take that at value, the next thing I have to say is either this is so staggering to someone who's seen a lot, been involved in a lot, that he feels he has to come forward with it. Or it's not true. It's made up, or it's some kind of conjecture or a mishmash of a lot of things there.
So
I don't know what to make of it beyond that. To me, to be living within a constructed reality doesn't seem to be all that upsetting to me or confusing to me. In a simulation is one of the the kind of the current buzzwords that go on. So I can see that happening. I guess I'm just one of those throwbacks that just refuses to believe that I'm not looking out to see stars and this great distance and space-time out there, that this is all just a very convenient produced thing. But I don't have any more proof for it than they have proof for what they've just put forth.
good point. I think that when I think of this immediately, when you talk about a constructed reality, constructed by whom and for what purpose? And then we get into all kinds of more spiritual and metaphysical.
Absolutely. I mean, is this something that what you and I would say is God has set up, that we pass through this, and how we do in this is where we go next? Is there, is this part of where our soul goes on this and goes forward, backwards, or to a different place?
Yeah.
I think you can fit a lot into that, but it's spoken in such prophetic, such distant kind of thing. And you're dealing with somebody who wants to ask Don that when he was out with Mr. Swan, and I don't mean this to be snarky or but to maybe lighten it just a little bit. Did they have tiramisu or cannolis when they had this fantastic dinner at the Italian restaurant with Mr. Swan? Yeah. Is this one of those situations where Don was told, leave the photographs, take the cannolis? Just throwing that out there, just to lighten up just a tiny bit. I will take emails at the address below for those that feel like that I'm not taking this serious. I'm taking it completely serious, but I'm not going to solve this for you in a couple minutes. And I'm probably the wrong guy to ask at that kind of metaphysical level. I can't change if that's what the construct is.
Right.
Again, it's sort of like this thing with AI, and we've been talking a lot off air about AI and the stuff that's going on and these things that are going on. Bottom line, AI is sort of to me like Amazon, okay? Created by man, very addictive, probably going to be our own destruction because it is created by man. And as far as I'm concerned, anything we create in this real world, if it exists, or this construct, apparently in this construct, we have the ability to put our own demise together. Yeah. It's one of those games like Sims, apparently, that if we want to be destructive, we can create a destructive civilization, a destructive path to ourselves.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective before.
That's because you're not drinking this. If you drank this, you would have the enlightenment. This is why they call it spirits, Padre. It makes you spiritual.
Okay. Let's head over to High Priest Don just for a brief comment on, is this...
First ask him tiramisu or cannolis. I want to know.
Yeah.
Don, a nation wants to know. A global following wants to know.
Veal maçon.
Yeah, that was your main course. I want to talk dessert.
Yeah.
Tiramisu.
All right. Good stuff, that is.
Now, if you're asking me about this guy, Padre, I got to tell you, and Cobra, I think, will agree with me. And as a matter of fact, he said a lot of what I'm going to reaffirm right now. I had a top security clearance with the crypto access. And in the military, you didn't go any higher than that. Okay, that was as high as it went. Now, that didn't mean bupkis if I didn't have a need to know. That doesn't mean they just brought out all the juicy stuff and I could look at it. No way. Now, this guy, as a contractor especially, if he saw where the Pentagon had stored the family Jules. I got a hard time believing that he basically purloined that, and now he's out willy-nilly talking to everybody with no repercussions. Okay. Even David Grush, all right, after his testimony at Congress, and he was given permission to do that, suffered consequences. All right. Somebody went in and pulled out his medical files and spread them everywhere in an effort to embarrass or destroy him because he was on the spectrum dealing with some autism. And this was a guy that was given the go-ahead. Now, this guy, I don't know. I've got hey, look, he had a hell of a story.
Yeah.
All right. Hell of a story. And parts of the story I found enjoyable. Doesn't mean I believed it, especially when he's sitting there fat and sassy and there are no bullet holes in him. Remember, in 1947, on July the 26th, 1947, National Security Act was signed into law. And in the event of a security problem, all right, under the National Security Act, they can do anything, including suspending the Constitution. And they can also, if it's deemed necessary, can commit homicide, can kill somebody if it's a threat to the national security of this nation. And here's this guy. Huh?
Is that actually written in their permitted, terminate with extreme prejudice, or however they put it?
Read my paper. Read my paper on disclosure. I thought you read it.
No, I haven't received it.
Well, I'll take care of that right away.
Yeah, please. I'd like to read it.
Okay. But at any rate, yes, including premeditated murder. Am I using hyperbole there, Commander Cobra?
Nope.
So the bottom line is this guy is fine, all right? His house didn't burn down. His car didn't blow up, all right? He didn't have an unexplained heart attack or a brain aneurysm. I got to say, I'm dubious about this guy. Now, am I always right? Absolutely not. But on something like this, okay, if he exposed the family jewels, I got to say, I think something would have happened to him. Commander Cobra, would you agree or not?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was driving at, Don. I don't know if we get people that, and this is part, because I'm very sensitive to deception, and because all of this is man's interpretation of what's going on. And we've had some very popular movies in Hollywood. I think a lot of times the ideas of what we see in Hollywood are, not emanating from some particular screenwriter or group of screenwriters' creative genius. I think that there's a planted kernel. There may be even a manufactured kind of process to use entertainment as a way to possibly get us ready and conditioned for things that are going to be revealed, or to send us off into other directions. Independence Day, the Matrix movies, all those things, put together a very interesting possibility. And previous to those movies, I never heard any of the things talked about. I did hear scientific people talk about these kinds of things, talking about, the simulation and where we're at, and reality, is a perceptive and the whole part. Okay. If that is all the things that have occurred, if that is part of it, does it change what we're experiencing within this? But in the particular part, I guess I just tend to be a little bit curious, a little bit introspective, just because I want to believe, just because I have beliefs. I would put this in a more personal level. if someone was to stand up and tell me that they are the second coming of Christ, I'm going to be very careful, because the book that tells me that this is going to happen says, beware of false prophets. They're going to come before that. Mm-hmm. Again, I think that's a fairly instructive way to look at this. Uh-huh. There was no preconditions in my Christianity that says that I have to immediately recognize this person. Mm-hmm. That's not part of what I have to do if this occurs. So when I see this and I hear this, and I see the long part of it, or the DD-214. One of my favorite things that's always brought up about the DD-214. I mean, the DD-214, like, they can't be falsified like any other document. Or in the age that we live in, how many letters, diaries have I seen, and then they come to find out the font that they're showing doesn't really reflect the period that we're talking about. That, that we're using a typeset that really didn't exist before on this date that's come out. I want to have a critical thinking approach to all of this. Okay, you've told me this. Now tell me, since you've seen this, I'm doubtful. I'm telling you, okay, I want to believe you. I'm taking you at face value. Help me through my problems that I have with your background, which is supposed to add legitimacy to what you're saying, and explain to me how this happened.
Okay. I want to move now to some other UAP news and discuss that briefly. Going viral now on what used to be Twitter is now X is something called the Buga sphere. And forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that. It's from Buga or Buga, Colombia, a video of an orb that crashes into a power line and falls to Earth. This has allegedly been covered. There are videos of it online and still images of it, and recently released CAT scans of it. And one of the physical characteristics, a test was done on it, and it says that it has an aluminum hardness of 330 HB, which is, I guess, double the standard aviation hardness on aluminum. Commander Cobra, can you address that aspect of aluminum and aircraft?
That particular standard does indicate that it is, double the general thickness, because you tend to use aluminum because its lightness allows for a lot of strength for a lightness weight, and it's not uncommon that's the outside skin for that very reason. It tends to tell me, though, that this would be a fairly terrestrial event, that this is not something that you would be using in a non-atmosphere type capability.
The writing on it, or I should say imaging, hieroglyphics, whatever you want to call it, I'm a little disturbed by the quality of the etching in this object. You would expect a advanced civilization to be capable at least of graphic design that is symmetrical, and not, you would expect the images to match up, and you can see that there are irregularities and so forth. And the CT scan of it reveals an unusual interior. As yet, we don't really know what, but the claim is that it is a form of anti-gravitic drive or something that defies gravity. Here is a picture of the image, and if you look at, the various etchings in it, you can see the lines are a little bit wavy. If you look at the curve in the curved images, it's not precisely curved. It looks like somebody had some fun with a Dremel tool and tried to be clever. Your thoughts on that, Commander?
Okay. I looked at this and I got to say that I kind of dismissed it.
Okay.
if it is doing what it's doing, it does remind me years back of a guest that I have who explained the types of vehicles that they were using, that they had created, that display these kind of characteristics. And they looked like much more like the traditional flying discs that we've seen. Mm-hmm. The sphere is an interesting thing that's on there. I had the same kind of reaction, Padre, on, well, I guess if it's anti-gravity, if it doesn't have that, there's certain aerodynamic things you're not worried about, meaning the skin friction of having those carvings on it would cause not having. It's not really highly polished, so if it's doing that, maybe it doesn't require, the aerodynamic part of it has been pulled away because it's operating in a different sphere. Mm-hmm. Interesting that it had this power line encounter. More interesting that there was somebody there to capture that power line.
Allegedly,
yeah.
But and someone there to capture these events or witness these events, which kind of makes me think, well, maybe there was something more drone-ish about that this was some kind of terrestrial or created vehicle. Mm-hmm. I just can't get too excited about this one. This reminds me a little bit of Mexico and the alien mummy that they had, and the whole government there was looking at it, and they were X-raying it, and then that just kind of went away because it just it wasn't adding up, and there's a lot of interesting stuff going on it, and it went away. Now, I want here's the guy that said earlier on, having an open mind on that. What I'm seeing and what's happening with that just doesn't match what I think would be going on if we had something happening there. So I just don't have not a lot of excitement on this one.
There are a couple other things.
Wrong.
Couple other things I want to get to, but before I do, Don, your impressions of the Booga sphere?
Everything's Charlie Deuce said.
Okay. So there was a government official who I think was last month, forgive me, I had his name and I misplaced it, but he claimed that we currently have technology to warp time and space. And if in fact that is true, that is huge, because the amount of energy required to do that is absolutely insane. I mean, they would have had to have perfected fusion or something like that to make it work. But we are also hearing now the president, and he's said it 2 or 3 times now as a warning to our enemies, that we have weapons in our inventory that no one else on Earth can even conceive of their capabilities. And you wonder if the government is preparing us for something there by saying, okay, we can warp time and space. That'd be huge. And these new weapons, combine that with the release of information this week that the new B-47 6th generation fighter will actually
F-47.
I'm sorry, F-47, my mistake, will be available within the next 2 years. And when you look at the amount of time, I think the F-35 was in 10 years.
Yeah, don't even compare it to that. Great airplane in many respects. Absolute disaster of procurement. Let's not even bring up the ugly family member here.
Okay, but in terms of the aviation aspect of this, Commander, you are our expert on avionics. Your thoughts on time and space bending weaponry and so forth.
So Charlie Deuce is my go-to guy.
Okay.
All right. So we can do time and space bending right now in a very broad sense of that terminology by taking one of Elon Musk's rockets, flying it to almost any point on the Earth and having it land vertically on that spot. Completely changing how we do anything in warfare and combat. So you could fly to almost any point in the globe in an incredibly short amount of time, land a rocket vertically, just like a perfect 1960s Japanese sci-fi movie to this day continues to blow my mind when I see them catching it in, they call the giant chopsticks for the booster and all that stuff going on. We're doing stuff that, we used to mock as fun part, and before Godzilla came out of the water and started, stomping on Tokyo. Okay. Obviously, you've touched upon another part of it, Padre. The amount of energy required to do this is probably pretty staggering, unless we've had a breakthrough in something. And I think the breakthroughs are probably there. But I'm going to go back to my old standby. If this completely, why are we pursuing the F-47? Why are we pursuing the B-21? Why are we doing this stuff? Why are we still using oil? If we have this energy capability, maybe it's so prohibitively expensive, but maybe it's so absolutely upsetting to the world order of how our economies are working and where we are. Let's be honest, folks. Let's look in the mirror. We're not very organized as a group of beings on this planet. We're just not. Right. We just had a conflict between two nuclear powers that, if I just read it correctly, are someplace around 125 nuclear warheads on each side, India and Pakistan. Okay? So my point is, we have elected and self-appointed betters that are trying to manage this. And we're still trying to have this money thing that's going on. You want to go back to our constraint, or our created reality? On the next created reality, let's not have money. Let's try that simulation and see how that goes, and see if we can have a better run when we run that particular scenario of the game that you're talking about. So my point is, it wouldn't surprise me in the least that we have things in hand, but we're trying to manage it. And all this business about AI, heard a very interesting story. Guys and gals are making tons of money on AI, much like we had the .com bubbles. And some people are already predicting that AI might be a bubble that's going on. And one guy clearly said it. So what? People made a ton of money on all the other bubbles, and a bunch of people lost money. That's how this is going. Okay. With all that said, do we have advanced technology? Very likely. Do we have some kind of realization of something that we have reverse engineered, an agreement that was made with a previous president in the 50s? Don't know. Wouldn't surprise me in the least. Are we at a point where we're trying to get above some of it? Maybe. We're at a very interesting time. It's a blessing and a curse at the same time. To answer your question, one second. I'm sorry. On this F-47 going on, the F-47 and the prototypes that they were out test flying, and I think that there's a much different approach, because the F-35 didn't go well. We spent a lot of money and we spent a lot of time to get to where we're at, and I think some lessons have been learned. The B-21 is a great example of how that has gone very, very well. And I have a strong suspicion that if we show these breakthroughs that are coming, this sixth generation manned fighter, and as we were explaining off air before we come in, we're not building any airplane that can be flown without a pilot. If you're doing that, you're stupid. There's just no other way. And I'm a pilot, and I always think somebody ought to be in the aircraft, but the ability to have a non-human stick actuator in there is very, very important. That's just a capability you have to have for a whole bunch of reasons what that opens up. It doesn't surprise me how quick this is going to go. And I think there's a lot more guidance going on not to have another 10 to 15 year debacle that we've seen with almost everything else that we've gone forward with. I think the present administration is much more forward-leaning, because if you have this big stick, if you have this capability, if you go and do this, it's going to prevent the need to actually do it. Now, I turned Don over to you. Sorry that I went long there.
No, that's fine. Back in the late 80s, about 87, there used to be a magazine. Today, it would be considered pornography. Actually, there were several around that today would be persona non grata. There was a magazine that went out for years called Soldier of Fortune. Mm-hmm. There was another magazine called Gung Ho. Okay.
I laugh at Gung Ho. I thought that one was just, too many wannabes.
Yeah. Well, at any rate,
I like Soldier of Fortune. There's a lot of good stuff in that. That was in
2-minute warning, guys.
An article came out written by an aviation writer who went under a pseudonym by the name of Al Fricke. You may be familiar with this, Cobra. But this guy wrote this article. And remember, at this time, Star Trek, the original series, was the only one out there. Now, they had the Star Wars movies and that kind of stuff, but I'm talking about episodic TV. Even the Next Generation had not premiered yet. And this guy said, we have stuff flying in the Nevada desert and can do things in the Nevada desert that would make Captain Kirk drool with envy. Now, the point of this is anything that we think we know today, you got to project another 30, 40, or 50 years, down the road, not going that far, but stuff that we have today is so cutting edge, you would think that way. Now, I've been told by people that have a pretty good handle on it that we have electrogravitic spacecraft. Do we? I don't know. But there are a lot of circumstantial things, gentlemen, that make it appear that we ought to be looking that way. For example, how many times have you been watching the live feed from the ISS space station when suddenly something inexplicable flies into the frame and oops, the feed dropped off?
Or somebody's hand goes over the camera.
Well, guys, we have to wrap. We're getting the wrap from the producer. And on that ominous note,
tell them we're not gonna.
Speaking of feeds dying, ours is about to be cut off as well if we don't wrap the show up. So thank you to the greatest audience on the planet, as Commander Cobra says. God's blessings and his peace on all of you. Until we meet again, thanks for tuning in to UAP Crossfire.
Thanks to all the
Good night, all
in the chat room. Good night.